Tonight it's my pleasure to introduce the curator who's going to introduce our speaker. Many of you already know Omar Lopez Chahud. He's been a member of our faculty for a few years and is an organizer and curator and has his fingers deeply embedded in the untitled art fairs on a curatorial level. So please join me in welcoming Omar Lopez Chahud to introduce our speaker.
Well, I think to introduce Gabriel Rico, it would take me probably an hour because I love his work. I want to start with that. And I remember, but it's not going to be an hour, I promise. It's going to be 2 minutes. But anyway, but his introduction requires quite a bit of, I'm honored that you're here with us at SBA. Thank you. I remember the first piece that I saw of his work in Mexico City at OMR Gallery. I think I said it right, OMR Gallery. And I was like, who's that? And right away, friends from Guadalajara were guiding me towards Gabriel. And I was like, I want to know more about his work. His work, to me, is the kind of sensibility and the touch that I particularly appreciate in an artist, because it's very honest and very poetical, but at the same time, it comes from a long process of research that he will be able to tell you more about. I have to say that Gabriel since then is done so much. He's had major exhibitions internationally in museums, and most recently he had a show at Perrotan in New York and also in Seoul, and also is currently participating in the 58th Venice Biennale. I love his work in the Biennale. I have to say that this is actually quite a treat to have you here. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Omar, and thank you for you, everybody, to come to see my lecture. I prepared this lecture just because I know this is a visual art school, so it's going to be involved how it's related about the process to produce more or less the last series I'm working on it. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's better, right? Okay. So I just going to ask to Dulce to help me to read all the text I'm going to present you. And yeah, I want to start.
My work develops in the zone where an idea materializes and crisscrosses with another's in the interobjective configuration of the space. I create pieces that fragment the composition of contemporary human being and evidence the geometric imperfection in the nature using the Duncan experiments like beginning. I have always been fascinated with the philosophical analogies and scientific disciplines. My work has been influenced by the sciences that study the form and the space. I consider myself a believer in matter, an ontologist with a heuristic methodology. I use technologic tools and scientific models as metaphors for collective memory. I use deconstruction and recontextualization as methods to continue the development of my investigation in areas such as knowledge materializations and the fragility of space. My work is a reflection on the nature of the pieces, from the materials used to produce them and their arrangement in the final composition.
So can I open the video? Can you help me? So I want to start with this experiment. It's a scientific experiment, and it's talk about how the water is going to be concave because the rotation of the glass. And then I'm going to start. Why it's important for me to show this video and and in this specific context. So for me, this is a very clear point when the many different things are related together to create something more bigger. The water is concave because the other massive bodies in the space. So that's the gravity. And why it's important for me to show you this experiment is because...
I read it?
Yeah, please.
Newton's experiment with a rotating vessel of water simply informs us that the relative rotation of the water with respect to the sides of the vessel produces no noticeable centrifugal forces, but that such forces are produced by its relative rotations with respect to the mass of the Earth and other celestial bodies.
Okay. And this one too, please.
A mathematical demonstration is not a simple juxtaposition of syllogisms. It is syllogisms placed in a certain order, and the order in which these elements are placed is much more important than elements themselves.
Thank you very much. So that's a reason. I mean, for me and for my practice, it's very important how the things are related together. I'm very interested in ontology and theories like OOO, like oriented object ontology, and it's how the things are related together without humans. And this is not only in my practice, this is, like you can see, is how the things are related in a very universal level. I want to start with that because for me, one of the most exciting topics to investigate in my practice is the science and the practical science like mathematics and physics. So Penrose is one of my favorite physicists, and like you see, the order in the equations are very important to produce a logical equation or a logical result. This is a series I work on it, and like you see, is the shape and or more or less the composition is very similar, like an equation. So in some point, I just start to ask what happened when I read physics books or mathematics books. I just realized, like the physicists and mathematicians talk about the sublime beauty are involved immersed in the equations, and I really enjoy the equations, but I cannot see that beauty. And in some point, I just ask myself, what happened if I substitute the letters and the numbers for objects I already feel appreciation, and this is the result. So, of course, it's not. I'm going to just change all the series. Like I want to show you more or less what happened with this series. So, of course, these don't have a numerical result, but if you are very strict, you can describe these equations. Like, for example, the crane deer is equal, like the integral of two stones, multiply like a steak, and then multiply again the P under the grape glass. Don't have sense in a mathematical world, but have sense in an aesthetical world. And the aesthetic is coming from the combination of the elements. These elements alone, they don't have the same power like when you take all together and create a piece of art. And that's important. That's a very relevant to talk about the first video I show you with the bucket experiment and these kind of equations I work on it. So all the elements, I found the elements in different things, like in second-hand markets, in the hills. I found, for example, that dog school I found in the street, so I trade, and I need to teach how work with taxidermy and how how conserve all the materials I work on it or use it in this series, more or less is kitsch materials. I really like to talk about the human history with this kind of materials. And question our relationship with the nature and our relationship with the pop culture. Like in this equation, you can see the Jesus Christ head is multiplied a Coca-Cola sign, so it's very related to the contemporary human history. I made some of these materials. I made this chop, and I made the brass arrow, and I made the neon too. And I mixed together with materials I made and another ones I found in my life. So I cannot separate my life from my practice. So every time if I go walking in the street and I found something in the street, I just take it. So for me, it's very nice to don't stop to be an artist. It's not I don't have a reason to stop. And I take advantage of all my trips and try to go to the chomp stumps or second-hand markets and try to take all these things with a very specific kind of aesthetic. So like you see, this series is going to stop in 2021, and it's related. This equation is is related with algebraic equations. Like this is the bigger one I ever made, and the idea is to create something like the cardboard using for scientists to create the big equations. So like a scientist, you need to do a lot of equations to have a very single result. So this is 3.2 by 3.2 meters. And like you see, this is more free. This is the arrows. I draw the arrows, so it's kind of it's not only found objects. I try to put use my body to create coherence between the materials.
An axiom is a proposition assumed within a theoretical body upon which other reasoning and propositions derived from these premises rest.
Thank you very much. So that was a series called Reducción Objetiva Orquestada, that is orchestrated reduction objective. Like it's a trick using for the mathematicians and the physicists to create a balance in equations. This one is, so when I finish, this is another series, I work on it, and it's the base of that series is the axioms. So this is a very simple axiom. It's a single plane passes through 3 non-aligned points. An axiom is very simple. Like the Q is valid there because the P and the R are testified the existence of the Q. And all the axioms need to have a plane to exist. The plane is the alpha. This is another kind of axiom. Axiom is an infinite plane passed through a straight line. So the line is the R, the Y, the beta, and the alpha are passed all together through that line. So the axiom is like a proposal, like a proposition. So I developed this series, and it's, the point in this work is about just try to imagine if it's possible to stop the time and to create coherence between different objects that apparently they are related together. This is another one, and it's all the selection of the objects is related with our more or less my daily life, like. And the aesthetic, of course, is very important. The color of the things I use. So now I want to present you this test. And Dulce, can you help me through?
Yeah. We have identified the following abilities in the figural forms of the TTCT. 1. Fluency, number of responses. Flexibility, number of ways circles or lines were used. Originality, unusualness or rarity of the response. Elaboration, number of details that contribute to a story told by the response. Abstractedness of the title, level of abstraction of the response. Resistance to closure on the incomplete figures or the ability to keep open. Emotional expressiveness to a response. Articulateness of storytelling, putting the response in the context, giving it an environment. Movement or action showing the response. Expressiveness of the title's ability to transform from the figural to the verbal and give expression. Synthesis or combination, joining together two or more figures and making it into a coherent response. Unusual visualization, seeing and putting the figure in a visual perspective different from the usual. Internal visualization, seeing objects from the inside. Extending or breaking the boundaries, getting outside the unexpected. Humor, juxtaposition of two or more incongruities. Richness of imagery, exciting appeal to the senses, flavorful, earthy, emotional, appealing. Fantasy and real figures, magic, fanciful fairy tales characters, science fiction characters.
Thank you very much. This text is coming from a book. It's a very nice book. It's called The Nature of Creativity, and more or less define the next series I'm going to present you. So this is my last solo show I made in this year. And like you see, all the objects are related together, but it looks like the aesthetic of these pieces is like if I explode myself and just put all my bones and my mind and my body together, dispersed in the space, my memories, all the things I like to work, the aesthetic. That sculpture is like 2.5 meters, and like you see all the other objects in the floor. Sorry, I relate it with our lives. The letter A and E is the first letter of the word aesthetic. The Coca-Cola is, for me, the Coca-Cola is not more a bottle. It's more about a human sign. You can just ask to anybody in the world about Coca-Cola, and they can recognize the shape of the bottle. The dice symbolize that we are lucky to be here. The leaf symbolize our connection with the nature. The stake can be the channel how the magic can be present in our bodies to be alive. And this guy is like can be a representation of myself. So it's where the place I come from, the desert is not far. I start to ask me about my relationship with the hills, with the mountains in my childhood to produce this new series. So it's how can I project myself in the nature and how the nature can project himself again, return to me. And I start to decompose the nature and to recompose in another kind of a shape. So I mix the real value, like the gold coins you can see on the top of the stake, and you can see the cactus fruit. So it's like a kind of a dichotomy between the nature and the pop culture. And I like the idea to work in this very cartoon aesthetic, because it's very simple for people who don't have an artistic background to understand and to appreciate this aesthetic. The kids just love this exhibition, but not only the kid. And it's because it's a museum, you need to think about how you need to connect with the people who's going to go to the museum to see your work. It depends of the place I'm going to display my art. It depends of the art I show. So it's like a kind of a desert.
Campbell's model continues a long philosophical tradition. One's notable case in point is the essay Great Men, Great Thoughts and the Environment by William James, which affirmed that the relation of the visible environment to the great man is in the main exactly what it is to the variation in Darwinian philosophy. In particular, the new conceptions, emotions, and active tendencies which evolve are originally produced in the shape of random images, fancies, accidental outbursts of spontaneous variation in the functional activity of the excessively unstable human brain, which the outer environment simply confirms or refutes, adopts or rejects, preserves or destroys, selects, in short, just as it selects morphological and social variations due to molecular accidents of an analogous sort. The chance configuration theory builds further on this tradition by introducing three sets of key concepts: the chance permutation of mental elements, the formation of configurations, the communication and social acceptance of those configurations.
Thank you. So, like you see, for me, it's very important to start to play with the image in my brain. It's very important to think. I am a collector of things and objects, but another part of my work is to create a new language, a new dialogue. If I cannot find a Coca-Cola bottle of ceramic I can make with my hands. So it's very important to play with your ideas and to play. Everything starts in my brain, and one piece can take me like 2 years until I feel it's time to put out of my mind. So like you see in the last text, it's very important for me the part like how I can relate myself with the nature and take this point in like an advantage to create new pieces. So I developed this piece in a residency in Korea, and I invite a ceramic school to create all the bases. So each base was created for different people, so you can see the personalities of the people is in the base. And the stakes, I collect the stakes in the area around of the ceramic of that residency center. And it was winter and it was very cold, so I tried to do like to take the forest and put inside the whole the gallery. These are gold leaf, and you need to be with somebody to activate the piece. So you need to walk behind somebody, because even the air fluency can cause affection, can affect this piece. And if you are alone, you cannot see how the flux is going to move behind you. But if you are with somebody, both can share that affection. So the idea is just to create something like the people can walk around and use a very basic, very elementary level of interaction with the materials. The idea is the golden leaf is going to be destroyed and is going to contaminate the place. And it's very difficult it's not too easy to define if it's trash or not because it's gold. And even this kind of subtleness in the material can cause a noise. So it's like a sonorous installation. So it depends of the project, like I told you, depends of the pieces I want to do.
In the early 20th century, another movement and philosophy stood in opposition to the formalism was created. This was called Intuitionism, and it came from the mind of Dutch mathematician Luitzen Erkers Jan Brouwer. Gloomy and pessimistic with a mystical bent, Brouwer looms over the early 20th century like a stern schoolmaster appalled by the chaos he sees around him. Brouwer scholar Walter P. Van Sticht describes Brouwer's outlook on life as a blend of romantic pessimism and radical individualism. In early treatise entitled Life, Art and Mysticism, Brouwer rails against industrial pollution and man's domination of nature through his intellect and established social structures, and promotes a return to nature and to mystic and solitary contemplation. Brouwer attended and then taught at the University of Amsterdam, although his dissertation was on the foundations of mathematics, presaging his later interests. Much of his early work was in the field of topology. Brouwer coined the term Intuitionism to describe his idea of how mathematical entities are formulated by the mind. They are objects of thought, and their symbolic representation on paper as is necessarily able to convey these thoughts from one person to another. In contrast, formalism focuses more on a manipulation of symbols that takes place entirely on paper.
Thank you very much. So I'm consider myself like in part of this movement, like Intuitionism, because I need to use my a vision from to the future to start to play in the way like how the things can be combined to have coherence or to have logic. This is one of my this is an old piece I made like 5 years ago, and but it's very obvious like how the intuition is need to be used, because I mix in this piece like geometry, like you can see the triangle, and the skull I made with ceramic, and you can see the three small lines made from wood, and the snake is made from wood too. So my studio is found like storage of things, and I start to play together to have this equilibrium and balance. And how the nature can be related with the human heritage once the humans are disappear. One of the questions I really like to ask me is like if it's possible for the animals to enjoy the buildings or the geometry without humans. And this is kind of the pieces can define this kind of idea. So it's for me it's very interesting if you think seriously like if it's possible for the nature, for the animals to enjoy the sun, the clouds, so without the human observation. And all this work is talk about that. I do this piece in the Arizona State University with the life department, and they give me chance to work with many different kind of taxidermy animals. So this, like you say, like you see, the title is Modern Slavery Calculation. It's like how the geometry affect the life from and the nature. And how the scale of the things can be used to compose, or just to put order, to suggest order in the chaos. The idea to mix materials is to give more complexity and texture to the piece. But this talk about more about the history from the materials. Once. In one point of my career, I just start to think which material can give me problems to define if it's beauty or it's not, if it's trash or it's not. And I found the branches like that. The branches put me in a position like I really cannot define if the branch is something ugly or is beautiful. The branch is already trash from the tree. The tree is not the branch is in the floor. But it's very difficult to define if a branch is if it's not, or if it's good or not. This depends of the life you decide to have, if the branch are or not have enough beauty. So I'm going to pass for the next series.
Tale of the writer, James Thurber, titled The Glass in the Field. A short time ago, some builders working on a studio in Connecticut let a large square of plate glass standing upright in a field one day. A goldfinch flying swiftly across the field struck the glass and was knocked cold. When he came to, he hastened to his club, where an attendant bandaged his head and gave him a stiff drink. "What the hell happened?" asked a seagull. "I was flying across a meadow when all of a sudden the air crystallized on me," said the goldfinch. The seagull and a hawk and an eagle all laughed heartily. A swallow listened gravely. "For 15 years, fledgling and bird, I've flown his country," said the eagle, "and I assure you there is no such thing as air crystallizing. Water, yes; air, no. You were probably struck by a hailstone," the hawk said to the goldfinch, "or he may have had a stroke," said the seagull. "What do you think, swallow?" "Why, I think maybe the air crystallized on him," said the swallow. The large birds laughed so loudly that the goldfinch became annoyed and bet each of them a dozen worms that they couldn't follow the course he had flown across the field without encountering the hardened atmosphere. They all took his bet. The swallow went along to watch. The seagull, the eagle, and the hawk decided to fly together over the route the goldfinch had indicated. "You come too," they said to the swallow. Well, no," said the swallow. "I don't think I will." So the three large birds took off together and they hit the glass together, and they were all knocked cold.
So this is a poem from an American poet, and it's described very precise how the nature is related with the new materials the humans develop. So I create this piece. This piece is just coming from that point, from that poem, and but more than just the piece is the idea to. Is not only in my mind that the question like how the nature is related with the new materials are now, and we need to be careful about this. We need to take care about this because for like you you read in the poem for a beer, it's very difficult to imagine and to describe a glass. They think like it's a crystallized water, crystallized air. How advantage is that concept for even for our mind, like crystallized air? And I like to be in the practical science, but I really like to be a little bit far from them and just use the science like a method to question the develop of new things. So these pieces, all these pieces are talking about how the nature is look at us or look at our inventions. Like you see, the coyote position is, he's afraid about if he can come more close or not. How strange is a Coca-Cola for a coyote? This is another piece, and you see like tumors of in the horns of the deer. But the sport industry is one of the most advantaged industries who's developed the new materials, like at the same level like the NASA or something like that. So it's a very clear way to question this relation. And of course, it's not about beauty, but it's a very rare beauty. And how we can use the nature to put our inventions. But it's like if we invade the natural world. I'm not talking about if this is ugly or not, but it's an invasion to the natural world. This is another one. So this is the first. This is the same project like I do in Aspen Art Museum, and Denver. In Denver is where the storage of confiscate animals, taxidermy animals, when the illegal taxidermy animals, whose the customs just take from the planes and everything, is going to a huge storage in Denver. Like they have like 200 tigers or more, So I asked them to give me the chance to use that animals to create this piece. More or less, all the animals I use, I found in the second-hand markets. I never paid to kill an animal to do a taxidermy. And these ones are all together in that collection. So if you look, like, is the sun right there? And the idea is to try to suggest a path that the people can go in through the forest. And once the people are in front of that mirror, like shape with the sun, and when the people just look back, they realize, like, all the animals will look at you.
The sacred tasks of an artist are to absorb the new knowledge of the sciences and assimilate it for human needs, color it with human passions, transform it into the blood and bone of human nature.
Thank you very much. So I think we have enough time to, if you have make me a question or ask me something, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
On your reduction series, how, like, for example, when you are, like, let's say on number 38 and then you go to number 39, what is your decision making? How do you go, like, from one to the other on that reduction series? Is there, like, a main narrative that you're getting through with the reduction series, or each time that you make a reduction is something completely new that you are dealing with?
It's the same history, of course. They are related together because they come from the same series, but it's like when you try to find logic in the chaos, because my studio is more or less chaotic. I need to start. I need to put my mind in blank and then start again. So each one is a very personal and individual one. And the number, the title, refers, of course, the sequence. The 39 is the most is newest than the 38. Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Could you talk more about, like, the role of, like, jokes and a sense of humor in your work?
Yeah. So the humor is a universal. Is a thing. Is very universal. So if you use the humor, or depends of course the color of the humor can be very acid or can be critic or can be depends of you. You give to the audience, to the public, the chance to feel a connection between your art and their lives. So for me, the humor is very natural in my art. I really don't look like to be humoristic in my practice, but apparently the aesthetic is related with more than humor. I think it's like a sense of be a human in this world. My work is not related with my kind of Mexican situation. I'm talking more about universal things, like to be a human is not like I mean, you can come from Spain or China or whatever, and you can really find a way to appreciate an equation, for example. You don't need to speak Spanish to understand, or you don't need to know nothing about the problems in my country. The humorists have that capacity to make more easy to understand my art. Like you see, I try to use a very philosophical task or comments to to construct a frame about how deep you can go inside the investigation, the research, but how gentle you can be at the end, at the point that you start to create a new piece. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your sharing, and I'm really interested with your like humor, like some joke and tricks, and I'm curious about as you know, when there will be different traditional jokes in different country, and how you balance the common humor sense and your own like humor language.
Okay, let me think the answer. The animals are animals in all the world. It's not depends about if the deer can come from Mexico, but people from Russia can understand the deer aesthetic. So the humor, like you see the poem, is very humoristic because we talk about, I mean, the poet talk about a situation with the animal situation without animal sounds. It's more about put the voices, the human voices in the animals to create sense in the human world. I think it's more. We have a kind of things like are very universal. Like for example, the red color. The red color is not defined from an apple or from a tomato. So I think I really like to work with that kind of universal things like color or, for example, the weather. The weather is not depends where the country you come from. You experiment the rain, even in Mexico or even in the desert once a year or something. So in that way, I start to think more like a human living in a planet. That more than a specific human living in Mexico City. Is an answer okay for you? Okay.
I know your work quite a bit, and I'm always surprised by some of the pieces that that balance is very important in the work, and also by the slightest touch sometimes can completely collapse. Some of the works, not all of the works. And I'm sure that depends on what you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Also, I'm a big fan of Guadalajara. I've been there like 5 times in the last year, 5, 6 times. And the artists working there, your community, is such a place that I think it sort of provides that mental and physical space and enough stimulation to make work there. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us also a little bit about you working and living in Guadalajara, and how that influenced somehow part of your work?
Of course. I decided to live there and to stay there because like you see, I work with ceramic, and in Guadalajara is a place called Tlaquepaque, and it's with a very deep tradition for ceramic for ceramic artisans. So I believe like an artist, you need to be close that the place you produce. You cannot pass the majority of your time far from the studio, because the studio is a reflection from your brain, and like a reflection of your brain, you need to see yourself in a mirror to question if is this enough good for be a piece of art. I like to be strict in that point, because in otherwise you can do whatever, and whatever can be art, and it's okay. That's okay. But in my personal process, I leave the pieces for I don't know. I mean, 1 month in a table or in the wall, and I need to go back and see it again and see it again and move one place one object from another place, and it's a very long process. But once you feel, I mean, we are the majority from here, we are artists. So when you feel something, an attraction from a material, you can feel that attraction in a stone, or you can feel it something. That's the first feeling you need to believe in. because it's true. It's coming from the deepest part of your body. So until I feel that, the piece is not finished. But with the practice, is a more simple process. At the beginning was a chaotic, very chaotic. Now I think I found my own voice, my own language, and it's more simple. But the crisis is there every time. And about Guadalajara, a little bit more to context is, I decided to stay there like in a statement, to don't be, try to decentralize the production in my country. That not, it's very difficult to be in Mexico if you are not in Mexico City. Now it's more easy because we are a community in Guadalajara, but it's more like a statement, I can do amazing things, enough good to be in Venice, and don't move myself to another place. Yeah. Anyone?
Hi, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience showing at Periton in New York and then also in Korea? Just were these new works you made for those shows, and your communication with the gallery and how that was?
Yes, working with the gallery is a very important thing. You need to think it's like a relationship, and you need to take care of that. And Periton is give me enough freedom to do whatever I want. My relationship with the gallery is kind of recently. I started to work with the gallery like 3 years ago. So they know my work and my practice. They know the aesthetic of my art. So starting from that point, I can just continue working with very free in the research I decide. The dialogue with the curators and the directors is need to be very close. You need to be you need to sit with them and talk about the selection of the pieces. Like I tell you, it's very different to have a show in a museum because it's a public space than in a gallery that is a commercial, is a business, but with a kind of public touches. I think I like to follow them decisions. They ask for me, I mean, specific projects for specific spaces, but I really like to be involved in all the places my work is going to be shown. I don't like to be in the point when you start to lose that control. So to make if you are thinking about how different it is to have a show in Seoul or in Paris or New York, they are very different markets. The Asian market is more about the relationship with the nature. They really like my art because my art talk about our relationship with the nature, and that cultures are more based in that kind of relationship. The American people is more open to my humor. So it depends of where I going to show the pieces I decide to show. Yeah.